In the previous part of this series, I managed to get the model kit looking mostly like an aircraft. In this episode I'm going to be focusing on the key sub-assemblies that need to be completed before I can move on to any painting. Hello everyone, I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and join me on the workbench as I continue this Supersize model kit. During this part of the build, I only used two products, which would be Tamiya extra thin cement and some Loctite superglue. So the first sub-assembly which I like to complete would be the wheels. Now the wheels do come in two halves which need to be glued together. I did need to tidy them up and sand away a little bit of plastic, particularly where the sprue gates were, just to make sure I got a good fit. It is worth noting that you get the choice of different tyres with different treads. I'm pretty sure I picked the correct one for the version that I'm going to be building, as it was mentioned in the instructions. So the main wheels are joined together, and then so too is the tail wheel. I did sand along the seam a little bit just to tidy it up and make it look a little neater. The next sub-assembly I'd like to complete is the landing gear legs and doors. Now the landing gear legs have a brass rod which have been provided and insert into a channel between the two halves. Unfortunately, in my example, there is an ejector pin mark right in the middle of this channel. This ejector pin mark is blocking the insertion of this brass rod. So to fix this, I held the two halves of the leg together and then opened up the groove using a small drill bit in my pin vise. Again, it is worth pointing out that there are early and late legs, and the version that I'm building requires the early style. With that channel opened up sufficiently, the two halves would be glued together, and a small amount of super glue would lock in the brass rod. This brass rod just adds extra support for the legs, as I imagine this is quite a heavy aircraft when finished, and it's a good thing they've included it, because it gives a bit more strength to this assembly. On the opposite side of strength, we have an area which I worry could be a little weak. This is the axle for the main landing gear wheels. This is glued into the landing gear leg and has a very small contact area. I anticipate that this could be a point of failure, as all of the weight from the model kit will pass through this small contact area. So fingers crossed this is sturdy enough to support this large aircraft. Following on from this, there are some smaller details which can be glued onto the landing gear legs. But it is worth noting that when you reach steps 61 to 64, I have identified another error. It tells you that there should be two part X16s. And I thought that I had lost one of the parts because I couldn't find it. Having checked the sprue map though, I realised that there was only one X16 included, and the other part we need is an X13. So just be aware of that, so you don't end up spending time on the carpet looking for a missing part like I did. These parts were then carefully attached into their slots in the landing gear legs, making sure to get them in the right orientation, and then the landing gear legs can be glued onto the landing gear doors. There are a couple of ejector pins here, which might be visible in the finished build, but I haven't done anything to address them. The smaller inboard doors come in a couple of parts which can be glued together. This is relatively straightforward, and this effectively completes the landing gear leg and door assemblies. Moving on to the next parts, I'm going to assemble the drop tanks. I've decided that I'm going to install mine with the underwing fuel tanks, and the first component that is added is what appears to be a fuel filler cap. After this, the other half of the fuel tank can be attached. I find it a little odd that they decided to do it in this orientation, as this will result in a seam line down the centre, which will need to be cleaned up. Had they moulded it in the opposite direction, they could have hidden the seam where the rim exists around the outside of the fuel tank. That completes the fuel tanks, so now it's on to the rockets. These RP3s may not be entirely accurate for my chosen paint scheme, but I've decided that I would like to use them. I just think it would add a bit of extra visual interest. The warhead of the rocket comes in two halves which need to be glued together. Then turning my attention to the rear of the rocket, there are 4 stabilizer fins. These are moulded in such a way that they should, quite intelligently, form a 90-degree angle, which is a good feature. Perhaps a little bit fiddly, and the fact that you have to assemble 6 of these does make this a little time consuming. With the rocket assembled, I can now attach it to its rail. The mounting point for the rail is incredibly tiny, so I did have to take care to make sure that it was properly attached, in the right place, and as perpendicular to the rocket as possible. With the 6 rockets completed, this would be the point that photo etch is added to them. Photo etch metal is included to depict the brackets that hold the rockets onto the rails. These brackets require folding and bending in a number of places to represent these brackets, and if I'm being honest, I really had no success here. Perhaps it's a lack of skill or a lack of the correct tools, but I just couldn't get these to form the correct shapes that I needed. I probably spent around 20 minutes working on just one of these etched metal parts, before I decided that I would cut my losses and instead design my own parts. So I jumped onto Fusion 360, and after a little measuring of the brass parts and where they folded, I was able to create a design which I could 3D print at home on one of my printers. This design work probably only took about 10 minutes, and after about an hour of printing, I had a whole sheet of brackets, which come as a single piece and are more or less to the right shape. I have not cured the resin, however, as this will allow them to be a little bit more flexible and be a little bit easier to apply. Of course, in this stage I'm just going to be handling this using tools, and I should warn you not to handle uncured resin with your bare hands, as the resin can be a little bit toxic. A little bit of super glue would be applied to the rocket in the right place, my little brackets then slid into position and the glue allowed to cure. I think for the sake of 10 minutes of CAD modelling, an hour of printing, and maybe 20 to 30 seconds attaching each one to the model, this was a much quicker and less painful process. I would do this for all 6 of the rockets, and then I would pop them into my UV box to cure the resin and ensure that these resin parts went rock hard. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I've successfully managed to complete a number of sub-assemblies which needed to be built up before I could move on to any painting. I am pretty happy with the level of detail in these parts, but did find that photo etch frustrating, but I think my solution to 3D print some replacements was much more time efficient. If you'd like to be able to download these brackets and print them yourselves, I'll pop a link to the files in the description of the video. For the most part, the detail and fit has been quite good here, but there have been some areas which needed cleaning up, and again, another mistake in the instructions which had to be overcome. I'm glad that I'm making some progress now, and in the next video, hopefully I should start some painting. So make sure you stick around for that one. Don't forget that we do have a Model Minutes Model Club, and if you'd like to join the Model Club, check out the links in the description. Massive thanks to these guys on screen for the extra support they give the channel. And if you'd like to join them and get exclusive access to early videos and other perks, full information is below the video. There are other ways to help support the channel if you'd prefer, but the best way to support the channel for free is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.